Hello, ladies and gentlemen. When discussing the current alarming situation which the Israeli economy is in light of recent steps taken by Netanyahu's coalition towards a judicial overhaul, voices become more and more clear in the following assertion. For Israel's economy, this massive judicial change isn't merely a risk, it has literally already become a reality. Latest analysis conducted by senior economists worldwide all point to the same direction. The judicial overhaul will harm Israeli economy. In fact, the harm is already here. Is it here to stay? What are the implications of this massive transformation for Israeli citizens? How is Israel's national security affected by the economic harm, both in the short and in the long run? How will it affect Israel's international economic relations? Is this process still reversible? And if so, what can be a way out strategy? INSS podcast today discussing the judicial overhaul and its implications on Israel's economy. We begin right after this. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining INSS English podcast. I'm Adi Kantor, and it is my pleasure to host in the show today INSS Executive Director, Professor Manuel Trajtenberg, who is also one of the world's leading experts in economy and economic growth. We will try together to analyze where is Israel headed from an economic point of view due to the current state of affairs. Manu, thank you very much for joining me in this very important talk today.
My pleasure, Adi. Good to be with you and with the viewers.
So, before we dive into many questions that we have on the agenda today, from the economic point of view, how would you analyze the current situation the Israeli economy is in due to latest steps taken by the coalition towards judicial overhaul? We saw what happened already 2 weeks ago when the reasonable clause, the reduction of the reasonable clause, was officially affirmed in the Israeli Knesset. How is the Israeli economy looking like at the moment, and how concerned are you?
So let me give a bit of background in order to talk about what's happening today. The Israeli economy as a whole is an incredibly success story, starting in the 1985, to be precise. We had hyperinflation back then and so forth, and we embarked in a stabilization program, and a long-term program of opening up the economy, relying on science and technology, what became known as the high-tech, the startup nation. Innovation. Okay, yes, indeed. And connecting strongly with globalization in the world, and so forth and so on. Okay, and we managed to institute fiscal discipline to an amazing extent. I mean, countries that are facing problems these days look at Israel with amazement. I mean, even in these days, we still have some measure of fiscal responsibility. So all of that brought us prosperity, brought us into the top 22 countries in terms of GDP per capita. We conquer inflation. We have a debt to GDP ratio of less than 60%. Just to compare, I mean, the U.S. got downgraded now by Moody's because among other things, the debt to GDP ratio has blown up to twice as much as we have. Okay, and so forth. And we managed to overcome crisis, the Second Intifada, the world crisis in 2008 and 9, the COVID crisis, all of that, we managed to go through with flying colors. Enter 2023. As we entered this year, a new government came in, and they put on the agenda judicial reform. And what has happened in the past half year is really stunning, because for the first time, events self-generated within Israel are badly affecting this amazing economic success that we had for so many years. And yes, it's already showing up, and we're going to talk about that
Where
in
exactly?
a moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe to translate everything you said now to our viewers, maybe to discuss the relations, the nature of relations, first of all, between national security. This is the Institute for National Security. How are they interlinked? The national security and economy, and now discussing what you just referred to, the latest changes in the last half year. How are they harmed by the judicial overhaul? Is this relation harmed?
So the first and foremost connection is the availability of resources. To maintain security in Israel, defense, we need to invest every year enormous amount of resources, but their share of the GDP, of the total, the pie that we produce every year, has not grown. On the contrary, has been lowering down every year. And we are now at about 5.5% of GDP, which is very high by OECD standards. But relative to what we are doing, it's amazing that we only can afford to invest 5.5% or 6% of GDP. Why? Because of economic growth. Economic growth is what allowing us to maintain a relatively high standard of living and an incredibly powerful army and security services and confront the national security threats that we are confronting. So if economic growth were to decline, then
it's already happening, Manu?
Well, it's already starting to happen. You have to be careful with that. But if that were to happen, the result would be really, really damning for not the economy, for national security, because we won't be able to maintain the same level of investment and the upgrades to that investment that we need in national security. And by the way, so the deal or not, okay, Israel will need to keep investing very high amounts into national security. So that's the first connection, okay? The second.
This is the factor that stays the same.
Exactly.
We still need to, maybe we
For
need to invest
many
more
years,
because the risks, the threats are growing.
And the investments needed to confront Iran, with the nuclear capabilities are beyond imagination. So what I'm saying is that a strong economy is not just for the sake of it or for the sake of a standard of living, it's what allows us to maintain the IDF as we know it, the Shabak as we know it, the Mossad as we know it, the nuclear programs that are talked about elsewhere as we don't know them.
According to foreign media.
So that's what allows us to do that. It's very, very important to understand. Economic growth in Israel is not an abstract concept. It's not a statistic. It translates into intelligence, tanks, and so forth, and at the same time allowing us to maintain a decent standard of living.
Thank you for this. I'm going to be maybe the devil's advocate here and say that there are voices in the coalition that say that it's going to even strengthen Israeli economy. What do you say to them?
Well, it's very interesting because, in Israel we have differences of opinion about everything. And if we put aside what politicians say, with all due respect, when you look at economists in Israel, virtually you won't find one that will claim that the current process, as it is going on, will benefit the economy. Okay, so they might be, and there are some sort of differences of opinion in terms of the gravity of the effects on the economy, but no economist that I know of will argue that what's happening is positive towards the economy. How bad it is, there may be.
This is left to be seen.
Yes.
How do you think this will affect the average life of the average Israeli citizen? All these the process that you're describing now, how will it be translated to everyday life? You say the damage is going to be enormous. How will it be translated in the life of, going to the supermarket? We talk about economy.
So, in the past half year, already we have seen the first signs of the damage caused to the economy. How? The rate of inflation in Israel has increased in part as the result of the exchange rate going up, and in turn, some of that increase in the exchange rate, meaning how many shekels you have to pay for each dollar, okay, has to do clearly to the political turmoil that was caused by the judicial reform. So on that, there is agreement. And in fact, the Bank of Israel just yesterday published another update to their studies, to their research, showing the extent to which there is a transmission mechanism between the exchange rate and inflation. Okay, so we as citizens are experiencing it directly through an additional increase in inflation due to these processes. That's one. Second, because of the same reason.
It's going to be more expensive.
Yeah,
for
things
all
are
of
more
us.
expensive. But there is an additional twist to it, which is that the interest rates, because inflation is higher than it should be due to the political turmoil and the internal crisis, okay, then the interest rates are also higher because Bank of Israel has to, react to the inflation. And so we are paying more for mortgages and so
this
forth.
This has happened throughout the year.
That's right. So it's it's not the only reason, but I'm saying there is an extra bonus here to the judicial reform that is causing this additional inflation, additional interest hikes, and so it's already being felt by the people at large.
And according to your view, it will. If we are on the same track and it only continues, we will see more and more damage.
Yeah, no. What's happening beyond inflation and interest rates is in a way much more serious, and that is investments in general, and investments in high tech had plummeted. The engine of the high tech sector is the startups. Okay, Israel holds a record in terms of number of startups every year and so forth and so on. The number has plummeted, and of that very diminished number, about 80% are being registered not in Israel but elsewhere abroad.
This is already happening.
This is a process. Backward looking, this already happened in the past half year. Now, some say yes, but there is a crisis worldwide in terms of the high technology and so forth. After factoring in those trends, again we have the additional blow on the high tech sector and the investments due to the judicial reform. So the effect of that, the consequences of that, we have not feeling them yet. I mean, they will come to show in the next few months, in the next few years, because what you don't invest today, then you won't have tomorrow. That tomorrow has not yet come, but it will come for sure, because the investments today are less than they should have been.
And this lack of interest to invest, growing lack of interest to invest more and more in Israel, doesn't come necessarily from a political point of view. When we think about the investor, the external investor, what he or she is interested in is stability. Not necessarily, it doesn't come from a political background. It's more coming from, is Israel stable at the moment or not? Is it safe for me to invest in Israel? Yes or no? This is the interest of the investor.
Absolutely. I mean, we may hold beliefs in our hearts, but in our wallet, there are no beliefs. There is only, the desire to make more money. And that's what drives
They don't
investors.
even know who are the actors, I think. They don't even know who the Yariv Levin is or the other ministers. They care what will happen with my money.
Only insofar as that knowledge informs them about stability, uncertainty, and so forth and so on, not in itself. Yeah. So that's one point. The second point is that, in economics in one sense it's the most democratic institution. In what sense? That there are thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of economic actors, okay? And each forms his or her own opinion based on information and so forth, and they act in the markets. The markets, in that sense, don't lie. They cannot lie, because if they were to lie, then somebody will be losing money that could have been made, okay? So essentially, we see it all over the world. The investors, the investment bankers, the rating agencies, the VCs, they look at Israel, and what they see is a mess that is homemade. And it has a clear cause and a process that evolved from that. We are still immersed in that process, which is done downhill. And they say, I don't want to risk my money right now. It happens to be that there is a very good project in Singapore, in South Korea. In those terms, I hear that music in real time. Yeah. I mean, they're not saying, no, we are cutting off ourselves from Israel and so forth. No. But, for the
we
time being,
we don't invest in the upcoming year.
We're looking elsewhere. Okay?
Yes.
That sentiment is incredibly important. In the end, when you ask yourself, how could it be that a country that is in this really troublemaking neighborhood, okay, in the Middle East, with a long history of confrontations, security issues, and so forth, how could it be that so many investors, people around the world, trust us, put their money on it? For two reasons.
Thanks to what?
Two reasons. One is because there is an enormous amount of talent here, entrepreneurial and technological talent, unrivaled. I mean, really, unbelievable. And second, because they trust the institutions of this country, the judiciary.
Independent. It used to be independent, and still are, I hope.
They trust that this country is firm and stable in its basics, its fundamentals. There's a concept in economics fundamentals. They trust that, and they see the talent. But if one of these pillars is shaken, the trust is shaken, that's very hard to bring back.
Yes, your words are very clear, Mano. You talked about also the view from outside. How do international actors, economic actors, see us, and how do they act according to it? What about what is happening right now in here? Voices that are saying from high tech, for example. We hear also the physicians. Starting to think about relocation. What is your view about this?
Yeah. So, this is very important to understand, to put in perspective. Imagine for the moment, you are an expert on Germany, among other things. You know Germany, okay? Imagine for a moment that the government in Germany would have started a process like here and say, we want to reform the judiciary. That elicits a big social protest and so forth. What will happen to the economy? Much less than here. Why? Because Germany, when you think of Germany, you think of the heavy industry. You think of Volkswagen, BMW,
export,
Bosch. You think of the big, giants of industry that are there, that they are not going to move away. You cannot take Volkswagen and move it away from Germany. Okay, certainly not in 5 years. Okay, so this idea of relocation is ludicrous in Germany. But in Israel, we
definitely
don't.
In a country of 83 million
Yeah,
citizens.
of course. But, but never mind. I mean, take a smaller country, okay? But when you're talking about Israel, our Volkswagen here is brains. And brains are mobile, okay? There can be brains of physicians, or there can be brains of high-tech programmers, or of entrepreneurs, or whatever. This is fluid. All it takes is a one-way ticket.
Yeah,
okay?
This is globalization.
But it's globalization. For some, globalization means the flow of goods, okay? Right. But for us, it could be the flow of outward, outward flow of people. These people have opportunities. amazing opportunity. It's a miracle that they are still here. Why are they here? Because they love this country, okay? They trust this country deeply. And again, like the investors, it's a sentiment. What holds this
in the end, it's
together,
a sentiment. Yes.
If what holds all of this together, all of a sudden is shaken, is broken, then the worst will come about.
Very, very alarming, everything that we're talking about. Do you think it's correct to compare at this stage, at this point of time, Israel to, for example, Hungary or Poland? Hungarian economy, Polish economy after what happened there? Or is Israel still a bit different case study?
So I'm always reluctant of making comparisons that are too close, okay? But history informs us, okay? Enlightens us. History shows us processes, processes that can be very dangerous, okay? So, no, we are not Hungary and we're not Poland. But the underlying processes of moving towards an autocratic regime dressed up as a democratic regime, because what is being kept is the mechanics of elections.
Even though the result is clear, a lot ahead. Yes.
But it's not just that. It's the result may not be clear, but democracy is so much more. It's
not just the majority's rule.
No, I mean, that's kind of some thinkers define democracy as the avoidance of the tyranny of the majority.
Meaning taking care of rights of minorities. When minorities are safe.
Yeah, but minorities,
democracy
it's not just minorities. It's the party that lost the election. I mean, it's not
the opposition.
The opposition, whatever. So what I'm saying is that we learn from this process. We learn from Hungary and Poland in some ways. We can learn from other bad processes elsewhere. I will give you one example. At some point, I don't want to name names, but at some point, a person that was clearly not suitable for the job was about to be named as head of the statistical agency in Israel.
Yes.
Okay? Now, this person really had no knowledge whatsoever, okay, of what that means. Statistics, data, the use of data, and so forth. But
it was a political decision.
But the reason he was not considered, actually he was about to be appointed, is because of his political attachment to the prime minister. Now, there are a few examples in the world about countries that did that they appointed to the statistical agencies political appointees, and these countries, what they did, it's very interesting, and this is not long ago, it has been going on is to, of course, misrepresent, for example, data on inflation. And so what happened is that the country then didn't react to the inflation, the real inflation, and it created all sorts of anomalies in the economy.
Created an illusion.
That backfired, but also real effects. I mean, this is really very damaging.
No transparency. The citizen doesn't know the real situation.
That's right. So this is just one minor example of gravitating towards away from democracy, true democracy, that affects the economy. There are so many ways it can affect the economy. And again, we should learn from these other countries, but, keeping the distance because we are not them, thank God.
Thank God, and hopefully we won't get there. Manu, what is the way out? Is there a way out? At this state of affairs, what is it still reversible where we are?
So we are at a point in time where in every respect there is still a way out, and there is still a way of repairing the damage over the long haul. But I will give you one example. One of the really bad consequences of what's happening is that the civil service, the profession, the high echelon of the civil service, the professional one, is living in droves. Okay, so it's
We see
hollowing
it
out.
daily.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, that layer is what has kept the country sane and functioning for the last 4.5 years of continuous political turmoil, with
Elections, 5 elections.
5 elections, governments lasting for a year or less, and so forth and so on. That process of hollowing out of leaving the public sector, that's incredibly dangerous and damaging, because then you won't have any, even if you had eventually the good ministers there, and they won't be able to do anything in transportation, in education, in energy, and so forth and so on.
They won't be able to apply.
That's right. So
their agenda.
That's already happening. Now, if we stop this madness soon, okay, then you may be able to bring people back.
To bring them back in the system.
But as we kind of go deeper and deeper into this process, it will be more and more difficult. Yeah. And that's the same in every respect. Now, is there a way out? Yes, definitely there is. And let me say the following. You ask about Hungary and Poland. One of the huge differences is that the protest in Israel is so widespread, so persistent, so well organized. So, I made the back of the envelope calculation. If you, take the average of times, number of times that each demonstrator participates and so forth, about 1.5 million people, 1.5 million, have been participating at least 5 times in demonstrations. It's an enormous number.
Yes.
And it's not vis-a-vis 9 million, the population of Israel. Think of the other population that is
really
not
is
Arab and it's not ultra-Orthodox and so forth. It's an amazing, something like 25% of the relevant population.
This is the ray of light.
Okay? And it's going on. Mm-hmm. It keeps going on. Okay, so what does it mean? This country, we may contract diseases, these viruses that are attacking us, okay? That's an allegoric way of saying it. And then it takes a while, but then we have very strong antibodies. The Israeli society, an amazing immune system. So I trust that. I mean, we cannot be hungry and we cannot be poor. We will never be, because that gene, it's almost a gene. And that's one, the antibodies. And the second one is the survival instinct that we have as Jewish people, okay? And we had to play it over history in many different circumstances. And now what is at stake is the Jewish state. And
the mere existence.
Yeah, and so that instinct is already showing up and it's going to be played out, and I trust that. And so, although we are in a state of mind, everybody's between despair and elation at the protest and, whatever. But we have to remember all the time that we have the power, we have the genes, we have the ability to restore our national common sense, our national sanity, and embark in a new chapter in this amazing story of 75 years. What we have done in this country is beyond belief.
It's true.
And believe me, we will keep going.
And you still believe it is shared by all, this common sense?
No, if it was shared by all, then we were in a different situation. But when you look at the polls, okay, there is a solid 2/3 majority in Israel that agrees on most of the issues, that is very aware of what's happening, that doesn't want this process to continue. So the only question is how we turn that 2/3 majority into political action and a political reality. What's the transmission mechanism for that? And yes, and that's what we should be concentrating on.
Professor Manuel Trajtenberg, I couldn't think of a better way to end this podcast with a very optimistic view between us and also to our viewers. Never to lose hope. And there is a way out strategy. We just need to really believe in it and share it, all of us. Thank you very much for joining me and for enlightening us on this very important issue of economy in Israel in light of the latest events. Thank you very much for our viewers as well. And thank you again, Manu, for joining me.